Today I've got another list of 10 underrated and or overlooked movie gems on physical media. So let's rock this. Hi everyone, how you doing? Welcome back. I'm Fuzz, and today I've got another sequel video for you guys. Last year I put out this little video where I went over 10 great underrated films on 4K and Blu-ray, and I had a lot of fun with that video, and you guys seem to dig it as well. So I figured a sequel was in order, if not even a little bit overdue. You know, I was chewing on it the other night, thinking about some great movies, and it occurred to me, I think it's time to revive this topic. So that's what I've got for you guys today, part 2, another list of 10 great titles on physical media that I think are either a little underrated or maybe just sometimes a little overlooked. Now keep in mind, when I say underrated, of course I realize that term can be a little subjective. It can be in the eye of the beholder at times, right? So I want to be clear here that I'm not suggesting that every title on this list today is some incredible, criminally underseen masterpiece or some brilliant high concept work of art or something. I simply mean that I think these films are decent, fun flicks that are definitely worth a watch if you're into the genre and style. And I think they're better films than their box office performance or critical reception might suggest. But I'm also just using the word underrated as kind of a form of shorthand to describe any movie that I think is a good movie, but maybe just doesn't get talked about as often as more prominent films that have the same actors or directors involved. Ultimately, I was looking for an excuse to be able to talk about some titles that I haven't had a chance to talk about much on this channel so far, and this topic just seemed like a natural, perfect fit. Also, just to let you know, this list today is not a ranking list. They are not listed in any particular order of preference. It's just kind of a random list. I am numbering the entries just so I can keep track of where I'm at, but these aren't ranked in any particular order of preference. And as per my usual MO, I also have a few honorable mentions that I'll be talking about on the flip side, so make sure you stick around for that as well. Okay, so without any further ado, let's get right into this list and see what we have here. All right, so for my first title, we've got a great action crime drama from 1982, and that is the film Vigilante. It stars Robert Forster and Fred Williamson. This is a great film, and as the title would suggest, it's a vigilante type film. If you're a fan of like the Death Wish movies or whatnot, you'll probably dig this film as well. Personally, I like this more than the first Death Wish movie. I don't like it more than Death Wish 2 or 3, but I do like this film more than the first Charles Bronson Death Wish movie. So this is a really cool film with Robert Forster playing this kind of everyman, working man, average Joe guy who has some bad shit happen to him and his family and has to deal with a corrupt justice system on top of that. And ultimately he finds he has to take matters into his own hands in order to make sure that justice is served one way or another. Fred Williamson's always great in these things. He plays a total badass in this one. Robert Forster's character, I think, if I'm being honest, it seems like he's a little slow to kind of come around to the reality of the situation and what needs to be done. But he does come around, and I gotta say, the final ending scene is just awesome. Of course, I won't say anything about it, but by the time we get to the end, he definitely has come around, and he's a different person by the time we get to the end of the film. So I feel like I don't hear a lot of people talk about this film as much. It's certainly not as much as you hear people talking about the Death Wish movies, right? Those are kind of classics now. But this is one I felt was a little bit more under the radar relative to other films in this subgenre. Also, the 4K looks amazing. Blue Underground always does a great job with their 4K releases. You really can't go wrong with any of their titles if you're looking for a solid 4K restoration, and this is certainly no exception. So, but it's really a good film, and if you're a fan of the vigilante subgenre, I would highly recommend it. So yeah, Vigilante for my first choice here. All right, next up, we've got a horror movie, or really more like a horror crime drama. This is from 1976, and that is God Told Me To, directed by Larry Cohen. Interestingly enough, this is, I think, probably one of the only Larry Cohen films I've seen. There might be one or two others out there, but I really am not that familiar with his work outside of this film. But this is a great horror crime drama film with a fairly significant mystery component as well. Essentially, there's a cop in New York City who is investigating a series of killings that have been happening. There's like an epidemic of killings in the city where seemingly perfectly normal people, well-adjusted people, are just suddenly snapping and either killing their loved ones or going on some kind of killing spree or whatnot. And when all the perpetrators of these various killings are questioned about why they did what they did, they all come up with the same answer: God told me to. So there's this whole mystery about what's going on. Why are these people just suddenly losing their shit and going on these killing sprees and doing these heinous crimes? The cop in question is also a devout Catholic, and so there's a religious component that definitely comes into play here as well. But that's not the only thing going on with this movie. There's actually some pretty funky stuff in here, and this film takes you to some pretty wild places. So, and I'll just leave it at that, so as to not spoil anything. But if you've never seen God Told Me To, this is a great film, and one that I definitely don't hear people talk as much about in the horror community, although I have heard a few people mention it from time to time. But I just think it's a really well done film. And on top of that, we got another Blue Underground 4K here, and this 4K looks so damn good. So if you're already a fan of this film, but you haven't picked up the 4K yet, I would definitely recommend checking it out. You know, I don't know what this film looked like on previous home media releases, so I can't really comment on that. This 4K was the first time I had seen the film, but I can tell you this 4K just looks stellar. It is really a tremendous looking restoration, and you even get a Dolby Atmos mix to boot for those who are interested in the audio options. So if you're a fan of the film, I definitely recommend picking up the 4K, and if you've never seen the film, I still recommend picking up the 4K. It's a great film all the way around. So yeah, God Told Me To. All right, moving on now to my third choice. We've got a great little action crime drama here from 1989, and that is Next of Kin. Great cast in this film. You got Patrick Swayze, you got Liam Neeson, you got Bill Paxton showing up in this one, Ben Stiller, Helen Hunt, a young Helen Hunt. But this is a great little movie. Patrick Swayze plays this Chicago cop who ends up investigating the murder of his brother. And that's all I'll really say about it. I'll leave the rest for you guys to discover. But if you've never seen this one, it's a fun ride, and it's a better film than I think its reputation would indicate. Although this doesn't really have a bad reputation, it's just a film that I think has gotten overlooked a lot. I think maybe a lot of people don't necessarily remember this film. They think of Patrick Swayze, they think of Roadhouse or Dirty Dancing or whatnot. They don't necessarily think of this film, but it's definitely worth a watch if you're a fan of the action crime drama genre, if you're a fan of Patrick Swayze and Liam Neeson. Yeah, this is one I would definitely recommend checking out when you get the chance. So yeah, for my number three, Next of Kin. All right, and next up for number four, we've got a great Michael Douglas film here from 2006. This is a film that I feel like I never hear anybody talk about this film. I'm sure someone out there does occasionally, but it's one that I feel is definitely underrated and overlooked, and that is The Sentinel. Now, this is a great political thriller. It's centered around the Secret Service, and there's like a traitor in the Secret Service, like a mole or bad egg in the Secret Service, and that, of course, is a huge problem. You got a great cast here, like I said, Michael Douglas, who I always love, but also Kiefer Sutherland. You got Eva Longoria in this, and you got Kim Basinger in this as well. It's a really good movie, and I think it has a pretty high rewatch value as well. So if you're into political thrillers, if you're interested in a Secret Service-centric action thriller, then this is one I would definitely recommend checking out when you get the chance. In fact, I feel like I've had this Blu-ray for a long time. I've had this Blu-ray since before I got back into collecting. Since before my long hiatus from collecting, and this is one I have always loved returning to. It's just a really entertaining film, and one that you know, I can rewatch every couple years or so and not get tired of it. So yeah, if you've never seen The Sentinel, like I said, this is one I feel like I don't hear a lot of people talking about this one. I seldom hear anyone mention this one, but it's a really good film. And like I said, one I definitely recommend. So yes, for number 4, The Sentinel. Continuing on with a little more Michael Douglas here. In fact, this next one I think may be Michael Douglas's best film, the best performance he's ever given in a film. And it's a Joel Schumacher film from 1992, and that is Falling Down. A great film that I think kind of was a little misleading to people when the initial marketing campaign came out for this film back in the early 90s. This is one I saw in the theater when it first came out, but I remember them marketing this film as almost like a comedy. And it is definitely not a comedy. It is very much a crime drama with a significant vigilante component to it as well. And the trailers at the time almost made it seem like it was going to be this kind of humorous, amusing movie that everyone could get behind and relate to. It was definitely not a comedy. There may be a few slightly humorous moments in the film that we could get behind, but that's essentially what they did when they were marketing this film. They took those few slightly humorous moments and tried to make it seem like, oh, this is going to be a great comedy. And it wasn't that kind of film at all. So I think a lot of people went into this film expecting something very different than what they got. But I loved it. You know, even though it wasn't quite what I was thinking it was going to be, I absolutely loved this film when it first came out. And, you know, occasionally I hear people talk about this one. I do feel like this one has become a bit of a classic, a kind of a modern classic over the years, or at least more people have reevaluated this film over the years. But I still feel like it's one that kind of gets overlooked a little bit, especially when you're talking compared to movies like, you know, Fatal Attraction or Basic Instinct. This is my favorite Michael Douglas performance. Well, this and Wall Street. So it's kind of a tough call between the two, but excellent film with Michael Douglas. Also, I should mention you do have a pretty solid cast here. Not just Michael Douglas, but you got Robert Duvall in this movie, who is always great. And you've also got Barbara Hershey in here as well. So yeah, just a really solid and very thoughtful film. So if you've never seen Falling Down, you should definitely check it out. All right, moving on to number 6 here, I've got another horror title for you, and that is John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness. Such a great film. This is one I feel kind of gets overlooked as far as John Carpenter films are concerned. Now, of course, people in the horror community, a lot of horror fans, know what this film is and do appreciate this film. But I feel like when you talk about John Carpenter's work as a whole, this one, it doesn't seem like I hear people talking about this one as much. And I don't think it performed very well at the box office either. Usually when you hear people talking about John Carpenter, they're talking about Halloween or The Thing or Christine, right? Prince of Darkness isn't always the first one that comes to people's mind. But this is a really good film. And I'll tell you, this has got one of the creepiest scenes or set of scenes in it that I've ever seen in any horror movie. Now, I'm not talking like gory or anything. That gore doesn't really scare me. This has got like a genuine creep factor. And I'm talking about, for those who have seen this film, I'm talking about the transmission dream scenes, the whole transmission dream sequences. Man, every time I watch that, even to this day, it just sends a chill down my spine. It is so creepy. And just the way they do it, the words that they're saying during these transmissions, and the imagery that you're seeing on the screen unfold as you're watching these scenes. Yeah, it is definitely creepy and kind of scary, right? It's definitely, at the very least, it's kind of eerie. But I think it goes even further than that on the creep out factor. So yeah, I mean, I'm not someone who usually gets too creeped out over movies very often. You know, I don't get scared. at horror movies. Just never have really gotten scared. Sometimes I'll get startled or surprised, like a jump scare or something, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a genuinely creepy and scary feeling, and this film definitely delivers that. So, and the 4K looks great as well. Of course, when it comes to John Carpenter films, I recommend getting the Scream Factory 4Ks. All of these titles are on, I think they're all on 100 gigabyte discs, right? They're so you get a little bit better encode than you would with the Studio Canal versions. But yeah, just a great 4K. You got Donald Pleasance in this movie, who is always great in these horror movies. I would consider Donald Pleasance to be almost like horror royalty, right? Now, I'm not going to give much away about the plot on this one. I think this is one that is best viewed knowing as little as possible. Just go into it cold, go into it blind, and just kind of let the story wash over you, right? That's the best way to do it with this one. At least that's how I feel. So if you've never seen Prince of Darkness, it's an awesome film and one I would highly recommend, especially if you're a John Carpenter fan, but you haven't gotten around to this one yet. Yeah, you definitely need to get this one in your collection. Okay, moving on to number 7, we've got a great release from Arrow Video. It's a Blu-ray from 1977. Great movie called Black Sunday. This is directed by the great John Frankenheimer of Manchurian Candidate and Ronin fame, among many other movies. Awesome film. And you got Robert Shaw in this one. You got Bruce Dern in this one. Robert Shaw essentially plays an Israeli agent who is teaming up with American officials to try and prevent a terrorist attack on U.S. soil. And Bruce Dern plays a Vietnam vet who feels like he got a raw deal, who feels like his country screwed him over, and he's got a plan to get back at the U.S. for the sense of betrayal that he feels. This film is just a great action crime drama thriller that I think you can also make the case also dips into the disaster film genre a little bit as well. The film has a great atmosphere, great mood, and just a compelling level of intrigue as well. So if you've never seen Black Sunday, yeah, I would definitely recommend checking it out at your earliest convenience. And of course, the Arrow Blu-ray always looks great. I mean, Arrow always does a good job on their releases, so can't complain about the Blu-ray restoration on this at all. So if you've never seen Black Sunday, give this one a try. By the way, if you're enjoying the content on this channel, do me a favor and please consider subscribing to the channel. And if you do, don't forget to activate that notification bell as well so you can be alerted whenever I'm posting videos that you might be interested in. And also don't forget to like the video as well. It really does help with the YouTube algorithm and the channel's visibility. Thanks so much for your support. I really appreciate it. Okay, next up, we've got a great little sci-fi movie from 1998, one that's actually kind of grown on me over the years, and I'm talking about Soldier, directed by Paul W.S. Anderson of Event Horizon and Resident Evil fame, and of course starring Kurt Russell, who is always awesome. He's one of my favorite actors out there. Love Kurt Russell. Now, the funny thing is, when I saw this film back in the late 90s, around the time it first came out, I didn't really think a whole lot of it at the time. You know, I thought Kurt Russell's performance was maybe like a little too robotic and too stiff. Of course, it's supposed to be for this role, but at the time, it just didn't resonate with me. But then fast forward to just a couple years ago when I picked up this Blu-ray, I was collecting Paul W.S. Anderson movies, you know, wanted to get Event Horizon and Resident Evil and all that. And I saw this one and, you know, hadn't seen it in years prior to picking up this Blu-ray. But, you know, I wanted to get more Paul Anderson movies. So I grabbed this one thinking, yeah, well, maybe I'll like it more now than I did at the time. And I did. I loved it. I ended up really liking this one quite a bit. It's just a great story. Kurt Russell plays this soldier who has basically been trained from birth to be a soldier and nothing but a soldier. There's like a military government authority here that has had this program for special soldiers that, you know, where they take complete control of the kids from birth throughout their entire life, right? And they essentially condition them and brainwash them to be these cold, hard, stoic, emotionless soldiers that aren't focused on feelings. They're focused on their mission and getting the job done. Well, Kurt Russell is one such soldier, right? And he ends up becoming essentially obsolete once these better genetically engineered soldiers are introduced into the mix. So Kurt Russell's character gets dumped off on this planet and, you know, as trash. It's essentially a waste planet that this authority uses to dump all its trash on. And Kurt Russell's character discovers there is a community of people there that had been stranded on this waste planet that had kind of made a life for themselves. And Kurt Russell's character kind of becomes part of this community, and he ends up helping them address a threat, a significant threat that comes to their front door later on in the movie. It's a really thoughtful movie. I think it's a great movie. I really appreciate Kurt Russell's performance in this movie a lot more now than I did at the time. Now it seems perfect, right? I think he only says like maybe 30 or 40 words the whole movie, maybe 50 words. He doesn't have a massive script in this movie, right? It's all about his facial expressions and subtle movements and whatnot, and how he can convey what's going on inside him by doing very little. So it's a great film. And, I'll admit the special effects are definitely a little dated. The visual effects, some of the CGI or whatever they were using at the time, this is 1998, right? But Paul Anderson, he has a lot of practical sets, a lot of practical effects, a lot of set pieces, and you can tell that he put a lot into this film. So despite the kind of soft-looking visual effects showing their age, there's a lot of good stuff in this film to feast your eyes on. So it's not all just a bunch of bad visual effects. It's actually got a lot of good set locations and set pieces and stuff that they put a lot into this film. You can tell they put quite a bit into it. So if you've never seen Soldier, yeah, I would definitely recommend it, especially if you're a fan of like Event Horizon or the Resident Evil movies. Yeah, give this one a try as well. Okay, for my number 9, I've got one more horror title to talk about today, and that is 1982's Alone in the Dark. Great underrated gem, I think. If you're a fan of horror, you may or may not have seen this one. This is one I wasn't even really aware of up until just the last couple years. Of course, I didn't get into horror myself, the horror genre in general. I didn't get into the genre until just a few 3 or 4 years ago. So there's been a lot of stuff like this that I've been discovering over the last few years. But this one I haven't heard as many people talk about. I've heard a couple people mention it here and there on YouTube, but this isn't one that I've heard a lot of people talk about. Great cast here. You got Donald Pleasance, you got Jack Palance, who is always awesome, and you got a little Martin Landau thrown in for good measure. Essentially, the story involves some mental patients, right? Some kind of delusional, psychotic, dangerous mental patients that break out of the mental institution during a power blackout. Once they break out, they decide to go after their new doctor, who they think killed their old doctor. Like I said, they're delusional, right? But they don't know they're delusional. So, but yeah, it's a good film. I won't say anything more about it other than that. It's best to just kind of let this film unfold naturally and see where it goes. But it's a great little horror gem. And if you've never seen it, I would definitely recommend it. All right, and then for number 10, I've got a great underrated Michael Bay movie. One of my favorite Michael Bay movies. I mean, it's like a top 5 or whatever, but it's definitely up there a little higher. It definitely beats Transformers for me. And I'm talking about The Island. Starring Ewan McGregor, Scarlett Johansson, Sean Bean is in this. Now, this is one of those films that I will tell you, if you've never seen this film before, I strongly recommend don't watch a trailer, don't read anything about it before you watch it. This is one of those films that I truly believe is best to go into completely cold, knowing almost nothing about the film whatsoever, because I think if you read even the synopsis on the back of this Blu-ray, I would not recommend reading it before you watch the film, because it kind of gives away some of the reveals. Although actually the IMDb description is not too bad at all. That's about the only description that I would say is you're okay reading. In fact, I'll read it to you. I've got it right here. It says, a man living in a futuristic sterile colony begins to question his circumscribed existence when his friend is chosen to go to the island, the last uncontaminated place on Earth. I think that's a great description. I wouldn't go into it knowing anything more than that. It's just a really well done film. It's a thriller. It's an action film. It's, I guess it's kind of a crime drama at the same time, but it's more of like an action thriller. Definitely fairly suspenseful. And it's got a sci-fi component to it as well, a pretty strong sci-fi component as well. So if you've never seen this great little Michael Bay gem, I would definitely recommend it. The Island for my number 10. Okay, so that wraps up my main list of 10, but of course, as promised, I do also have some honorable mentions for you. Just a few today, not a huge amount of honorable mentions, but the first of which is a great little film called Now You See Me. This came out in 2013, so a little bit later film than I usually talk about on this channel, but just a great little film. And I say this in spite of the fact that it's got a couple actors in it that I really don't like. In fact, two of the main actors in this film are ones that they're on my actors that bug the shit out of me list. And that would be Jesse Eisenberg and Mark Ruffalo. And if you're a regular viewer to the channel, you probably heard me rail against these two actors in recent videos, especially my video on the state of the live-action superhero film genre. You know, normally I wouldn't go for a film that has Jesse Eisenberg in it or Mark Ruffalo. However, this is actually a pretty good film. It's a really entertaining ride. It's got a great little story, and it's a fairly creative film as well. Plus, it does also have a couple actors in it that I do like, namely Morgan Freeman and Michael Caine. So it's not a total bust on the acting front, but it is a really good story. This movie combines two fun topics together. You got magic here, and then you've got the heist film. That also comes into play here as well. So if you're into magic and you're into heist movies, then this is probably the perfect fit for you, because it does combine both, and it's just a whole lot of fun. I won't say too much about the film beyond that, but if you haven't checked out Now You See Me, it's on this list because I think it's a really enjoyable and rewatchable film. They even did a sequel to this film, Now You See Me 2. That one's fairly good, but it's not as good as this one. But if you haven't seen it, you should definitely check this one out. Another honorable mention here is the movie Drive from 1997. No, I'm not talking about the Ryan Gosling movie. This is a movie I didn't even know about until this 4K release came out. And it was a blind buy for me. I was like, yeah, that looks fun. I'll give it a shot. And I wasn't disappointed. It was a lot of fun. Now, this stars Mark Dacascos, who I couldn't quite place who this guy was. Prior to seeing this, I didn't think I had ever heard of the guy. And then I realized right before filming this video, just from reading the back here, that he was in John Wick 3. In John Wick 3 Parabellum, he played this kind of somewhat loony hitman who is fanboying all over John Wick and, you know, loves John Wick, but is also after him and wants to be the one to take him out. That's Mark Dacascos. Well, you got a young Mark Dacascos in this film, and it's a really fun action film. You also got Kadeem Harrison. You got a young Brittany Murphy in this film as well. You know, this is it combines kind of the buddy cop movie with like martial arts, right? Although it's not, these guys aren't cops, right? This is about Mark Dacascos plays this like enhanced human being. It's like a prototype, and he hooks up with this other guy. It's a buddy pairing movie. They're not cops, but it's like an unlikely duo of guys become buddies and end up working together, right? To deal with the situation they're confronted with. But it's a really fun film, total badass action movie. The martial arts in here is top notch, great martial arts action, and yeah, just a fun ride. So if you've never seen Drive from 1997 and you're a big fan of action films and martial arts films, this is one I would definitely recommend checking out. All right, next up, another honorable mention here. This one I'm probably going to get some shit for. This one might surprise you guys a little bit because I'm a huge fan of the original Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? It's like a top 10 favorite movie for me. But I also think the remake with Colin Farrell is worth a look. It's definitely worth a watch. It is not as bad, at least I don't think it's as bad as some people have made it out to be. Now, let's be clear here, all right? Being such a big fan of the original Arnold film and, Paul Verhoeven film, I went into this with low expectations. I wasn't expecting it to be some total banger or anything, right? And, it really doesn't compare to the original. Let's get that out of the way right now. No, this is not as good as the original, not even close. But it's not a total piece of shit either. It's actually a pretty entertaining film. I actually saw this in the theater at the time when it came out, but I do prefer this extended director's cut. It's got about 12 extra minutes of footage, including a deleted scene that has Ethan Hawke in it. He doesn't otherwise appear in this movie at all, but he's in that deleted scene. Of course, you got Kate Beckinsale and Jessica Biel, couple hotties there, yeah, and it's just a fun ride. Now, it's different. It's very different than the original Total Recall, right? And I'm just going to tell you right up front, there's no Mars in this film, all right? Mars is not does not factor into the story here. It's a completely different kind of story. It's the same kind of story, but the circumstances in the story are a little bit different. You never leave Earth for this film. But the world building that's created here, I think the director did a pretty good job. Who directed this? Len Wiseman. Len Wiseman directed this. And I think he did a fairly good job with it. You definitely get the vibe of the futuristic society that he's created there. It's just not the same as the original Total Recall. So you have to go into it prepared for that. My advice is that when you watch this film, go into this film with very low expectations. Don't expect it to be anything like the original, okay? It's quite different. It has some similarities, and it's, certainly the same essential story, but yeah, I would not recommend comparing this to the original in your mind while you're watching it. If you can try and separate that when you're watching this, I think you might have some fun with this. I think it's a very entertaining film for what it is. But of course, I wasn't going to put it in the list of 10, right? I was only going to put this in honorable mentions because I realize not everybody may share my opinion on this. And some people are not going to like this because it's so different from the original. But if you can handle that, if you can separate the original, I think there's a good time to be had in watching this film. And I've seen it a few times now. I saw it in the theater, and I've seen it at least 3 or 4 times since then. So it still has a certain amount of rewatch value for me. So anyway, yeah. Total Recall, the remake with Colin Farrell from 2012. Okay, and for my last honorable mention, this is a film that I have talked about on the channel before, but it's been quite a while, and you probably only heard me talk about it in my Vinegar Syndrome videos that I did last year. Because it's been a while since I talked about it, I do think it's a good film. I do think this is one worth mentioning in the underrated, overlooked, underseen category. And that is Terminal Island from 1973. This is a great prison colony type film. Essentially, it takes place in this kind of alternate reality where the state of California has taken an island off the coast of California and turned it into like a prison colony. There are no guards on this prison. There are no rules. Pretty much all the worst offenders are dumped there and left to fend for themselves. So it's not unlike the 1994 Ray Liotta film, No Escape. Similar kind of premise, right? where there's this kind of society that emerges on this prison colony island, right? Where there's this hierarchy, there's these rules that they develop their own rules or whatever. I'll be the first to tell you, this is not a politically correct film, as you would expect for 1973, right? There is some pretty intense and hardcore stuff in this film that some people may get wigged out over. I don't get wigged out over stuff like that. I like these old school films, but you know, some people may have problems with some of the terminology and things that are said in this film. So I just want to give you a fair warning on that, give you a heads up. Anyway, great film. It's an ensemble cast. Really, the only notable name in this film is Tom Selleck. You get a really early performance from Tom Selleck here. But yeah, a good movie, a fun movie. This is a Vinegar Syndrome release, by the way. And if you want to get it without the slipcover, you can buy this from Amazon. But otherwise, if you're looking for the slipcover, assuming they're still available, I don't know if they're out of stock yet or not, but you have to get it from Vinegar Syndrome's website if you want the cool slip. Anyway, Terminal Island, a great film if you're into prison colony type films. Yeah, I think this one is definitely worth a watch. So that's my last honorable mention for the day. Okay, so that wraps up my list of underrated or underseen, overlooked movies on physical media. Let me know what you think of my list. Let me know what you think of my choices in the comments down below. I always love hearing from you guys. Which films piqued your interest? That's what I want to know. Are any of the films that I talked about here today ones that sound interesting to you? And also, if you've got any other ideas for me that you'd like to drop in the comments, films that maybe I hadn't thought of, I'm always looking for suggestions for other films to check out that I haven't seen. So make sure you leave me some feedback in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, share if you're feeling so inclined. Thank you so much for watching today, guys. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you soon.